There are moments when fortune doesn't slip away with a shout, but with a whisper, when wealth isn't lost through foolish mistakes, but through invisible currents, small, unnoticed choices that shape the space you live in every day. Now let me ask you a question you may have never considered. What if your home, right now, is either silently attracting abundance or quietly blocking it, depending on the living beings you invite inside? You see, in Feng Shui, nothing in your environment is neutral. Every object, every placement, every form carries a signature, especially the things that are alive, especially the plants you care for, water, nurture. They are not merely decoration. They are silent architects of your fortune or the slow undoing of it. They either nourish your chi, uplifting your health, wealth, and relationships, or they quietly erode it day after day like a river hollowing out a stone. Today, we're going to open a new doorway of understanding. Together, we'll walk through 6 sacred plants, plants that ancient Feng Shui masters have long revered, not because of superstition, but because of how precisely they influence the invisible energy that builds your future. This isn't about luck charms or magic thinking. It's about understanding how living energy interacts with living space. It's about placing intention where most people leave chance. Think about it. We work so hard to build a life. We labor, we strive, we plan. But if the very space we retreat to, the very walls and corners we call home, are unconsciously weakening our efforts, then no amount of struggle can fully compensate. You might feel it already, that invisible drag, that sense that you're pushing against something you can't quite name, that despite doing everything right, growth feels slower, relationships feel more strained, and opportunities feel just out of reach. Often the issue isn't the effort you're making, it's the silent environment absorbing or scattering that effort before it has a chance to manifest. Plants, those quiet companions of our homes, are far more than aesthetic choices. In Feng Shui, they are messengers of growth, conductors of qi, protectors of fortune, but only if chosen wisely, only if understood deeply. Some plants amplify life force. Some anchor clarity, stability, and abundance. But others, without meaning to, become conduits of stagnation, confusion, even loss. Their forms, their growth patterns, their energetic frequencies all play a role in shaping the unseen architecture of your future. And so today, I invite you not just to learn, but to see, to feel, to reimagine your living space, not just as 4 walls and furniture, but as a living organism. A field of energy you're either nourishing or neglecting. A field that is responding right now to what you place inside it. In the next few moments, we'll explore these 6 sacred plants together. You'll discover which living forces Feng Shui masters have trusted for centuries to protect vitality, attract fortune, and stabilize emotional harmony. You'll understand why some common, popular plants, despite their beauty, may actually be eroding your energetic foundation without you realizing it. And you'll see how simple shifts, not expensive renovations or drastic changes, can recalibrate the energy of your home, and by extension, your life. But before we begin, if these quiet teachings speak to your heart, if you feel even a subtle recognition stirring within you, I invite you to support our journey. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about who may be seeking more harmony in their life, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We are so close to reaching 1,000 followers, and with your support, we can bring these grounded, timeless Feng Shui insights into even more homes around the world. Every click, every comment, every share helps plant a seed, not just for this channel, but for the quiet restoration of ancient wisdom in a world that sorely needs it. So take a breath, feel the space around you, sense the life that is already vibrating within your home, asking for alignment, asking for attention. You don't need to believe in superstition. You don't need to change your whole life overnight. You simply need to begin noticing. Because energy is not a mystery, it's a mirror. And today we're going to start polishing that mirror, one sacred plant at a time. Let's begin. Why plants are silent architects of energy. In Feng Shui, plants are far more than decor. They are silent architects of energy. shaping the way qi moves through a space, either anchoring it, lifting it, or quietly draining it away. Every leaf, every stem, every direction a plant grows holds meaning far beyond its appearance. The very presence of a living being in a room exerts an energetic pull, a silent conversation between form and space that few people consciously notice but everyone unconsciously feels. A healthy, thriving plant does not merely sit passively in a corner. It breathes, it gathers vitality, it acts as a reservoir of living qi, pulling life force toward it, sustaining a subtle current of freshness that nourishes everyone who enters the space. In contrast, a withering plant, a sick, neglected, or dying one, acts like an anchor of decay. It doesn't just rot in isolation. It invites decline into the room itself. In Feng Shui, the principle is simple but profound. A dying tree doesn't only rot itself, it invites decay around it. The deterioration spreads silently, seeping into the emotions of the people living there, into the fortune they are trying to build, into the opportunities that otherwise might have flowed their way. When you place a plant into your home, you are making a powerful, unconscious statement to the universe. This is the kind of life energy I want to live with. Yet most people make this choice based on aesthetics alone. They select a plant because it looks beautiful in a store, because it matches the color of a room, or because it is popular in magazines. Very few pause to consider the deeper relationship between that living being's structure, health, symbolism, and the destiny they are shaping day by day within their walls. Imagine a home filled with spiky, aggressive plants, all angles and thorns and sharp leaves. It may look dramatic, it may even seem designed, but the underlying message being absorbed into the walls, into the breathing space, into the family's collective unconscious is one of defensiveness, harshness, protectionism at the expense of openness. Over time, that energy crystallizes into emotional armor, short tempers, trust issues, missed connections. Now contrast that with a home where the plants are chosen intentionally as quiet builders of destiny, rounded leaves that invite softness and ease, gentle upward growth that signals aspiration without aggression, thriving, healthy forms that remind every cell in your body that life is abundant, that support is natural, that reaching higher is safe. These aren't just pretty plants. They are energetic pillars holding up the invisible roof of your life. In this way, plants in Feng Shui are not secondary. They are not background. They are agents of momentum or stagnation. They are living mirrors reflecting back to you either your deepest aspirations or your hidden blocks. They are as influential as furniture placement, as powerful as the orientation of your front door, as critical as the balance of light and shadow in your rooms. Every living being you invite into your space carries its own signature, its own silent influence. You cannot afford to think casually about this. Choosing the right plants is not superstition. It is wisdom. It is a conscious act of alliance with forces greater than yourself. It is a form of energetic partnership, a way of saying, I align my home, and therefore my mind, my relationships, my future, with forms that nourish, stabilize, and elevate. Right plants are not just ornaments. They are architects. They are silent builders of destiny, shaping the emotional and financial scaffolding of your life without needing words, without demanding attention. They work quietly, but they work profoundly. And the truth is, your home is already speaking through the life forms you've placed within it. Every wilted stem, every thriving bloom, every tangled vine or clear growth arc is part of the silent story your home is telling about who you are becoming. You don't need to rip everything out overnight. You don't need to live in fear of every drooping leaf, but you do need to see. You do need to choose. You do need to understand that what you permit to live alongside you is also living inside you. Because in Feng Shui and in life, energy is not passive, it's participatory. And once you awaken to the power of the green beings within your walls, you begin to understand you are never decorating. You are always building something. The only question is, what? Plant 1, mini Bodhi tree, awakening an emotional shield. Among all sacred plants, few hold the gravity and quiet authority of the Bodhi tree. In Feng Shui and across countless spiritual traditions, the Bodhi represents not just wisdom, but the profound resilience of the spirit when anchored properly in its own truth. It is under a bodhi tree, after all, that Siddhartha Gautama sat and awakened to the ultimate nature of suffering and liberation. And while a full-grown bodhi can take decades to reach its sprawling, sheltering canopy, even a miniature bodhi tree, carefully placed within a home, becomes an energetic lighthouse, a gentle but unwavering signal that the space is consecrated for clarity, emotional strength, and renewal. The symbolism woven into the bodhi is multi-layered and immediate. Its heart-shaped leaves speak of compassion that is both tender and strong. Its slow, deliberate growth pattern mirrors the pace at which real transformation occurs. Not in rushes of enthusiasm, but in steady, patient unfolding. The bodhi tree teaches that true power is not forceful. It is rooted, enduring, and unshakable, even in storms. In Feng Shui practice, inviting a mini bodhi tree into your home is not merely an aesthetic choice. It is an energetic commitment to awakening, to emotional shield building, and to deep, non-reactive wisdom. It signals to the chi of your space and to your own subconscious that this is a place where higher vision is cultivated, not abandoned at the first sign of turbulence. From a placement perspective, the bodhi thrives best where silence, reflection, and mental clarity are most needed. Ideal locations include meditation nooks, study corners, private altars, or even tucked respectfully into a bedroom corner, where dreams ferment and higher insights often rise to the surface. The energy it radiates is gentle but insistent. Over time, its influence is less like a dramatic floodlight and more like the subtle reorientation of a compass needle, so gradual you barely notice at first. And yet, one day, you find yourself facing true north with a sense of rightness that cannot be explained, only felt. I recall a simple but telling story from one of my consulting journeys. A public school teacher, known for her passion but also her emotional volatility, reached out after experiencing repeated conflicts during staff meetings. No matter how she tried to stay calm, she found herself triggered, drained, and frustrated by the slow pace of institutional change. Together, we examined her workspace and noticed that while it was orderly, it lacked any true emotional anchor. There were no living beings, no reminders of higher purpose, only papers, whiteboards, and the inevitable clutter of a teaching life. Acting on my suggestion, she placed a mini bodhi tree on the corner of her desk. She tended it daily, even if just for a few seconds, watering it mindfully, straightening its pot, touching a leaf during moments of frustration. Within weeks, she reported something she had not expected. Not that the meetings became less chaotic, but that she no longer entered them carrying the same internal chaos. She spoke more slowly, she reacted less, she left with energy to spare. Opportunities for leadership began opening. The bodhi had not changed the external environment. It had changed her internal weather. In Feng Shui, this is always the deeper goal. To alter the visible by first altering the invisible. To build a fortress of wisdom inside oneself so that fortune, opportunity, and peace recognize a place to land and thrive. A mini bodhi tree is not a magic fix. It cannot erase all conflict or solve all emotional wounds, but it shifts the underlying vibration from reactivity to responsiveness, from panic to patience, from scattered hurt to grounded clarity. From a technical point of view, caring for a mini bodhi tree is itself a meditative act. It prefers bright, indirect light, reminding us to seek the middle way, neither too harsh nor too hidden. It thrives on consistent but not excessive watering, echoing the need for balance between nourishment and independence. Its roots are slow to expand, but once they do, they form a foundation that is incredibly hard to uproot. Just so, your intentions, when anchored through small daily rituals, form the root work of lasting internal transformation. In selecting a mini bodhi for your home, trust not just your eyes, but your intuition. Notice how the tree feels to you. A vibrant, healthy specimen will feel almost magnetic, quietly drawing you toward a stillness you didn't realize you were seeking. In time, you may notice that its presence doesn't merely beautify your space, it dignifies it. It marks it as a field of growth, of awakening, of emotional sovereignty. The bodhi teaches that life's storms are not meant to be avoided. They are meant to be witnessed from a place of unshakable calm. By placing even a miniature version of this sacred tree into your daily life, you are weaving that lesson into your own destiny. You are choosing to make wisdom, not reaction, your home's silent heartbeat. Plant 2, fragrant dracaena, hidden fortunes revealed. If the mini bodhi tree anchors clarity and resilience, then the fragrant dracaena is the plant that whispers promises of hidden fortunes unfolding quietly beneath the surface. In Feng Shui, not all prosperity manifests with a trumpet blast or grand, immediate arrival. Some of the most enduring wealth, the kind that stays, deepens, and becomes generational, moves slowly at first, like an underground river carving its bedrock path. This is the energetic nature of the fragrant dracaena. It carries within its layered, unfolding leaves the pattern of delayed but inevitable breakthrough. Its growth reminds us that fortune is often built not through sudden windfalls, but through patience, perseverance, and trust in invisible momentum. The symbolism behind the fragrant dracaena is intricate yet instantly resonant to those who understand the language of energy. Each leaf that emerges curls open like a scroll being gently unfurled, revealing a new chapter, a hidden message, a fresh potential previously concealed. In traditional Feng Shui analysis, plants that grow upright with strong central stalks, especially those with a gradual, graceful unfolding, are prized for their ability to stabilize and channel upward-moving qi. The fragrant dracaena exemplifies this principle perfectly. Its steady, resilient growth becomes a living metaphor for wealth that may not scream its arrival, but eventually becomes undeniable in its influence. Ideal placement for this plant is strategic. Entryways, for example, benefit enormously from its presence. When positioned near the main door, it acts as a filter, sifting chaotic external energy and allowing only nourishing, expansive qi to enter the home. It signals to the universe and to visitors alike that this is a place where energy is directed, not wasted. A second optimal location is the southeast sector of the home, traditionally associated with wealth and financial abundance. There, the dracaena's slow but certain growth nurtures not only material prosperity, but also emotional growth, the kind that fortifies relationships, deepens family bonds, and builds a sense of internal richness. One of the most fascinating aspects of the fragrant dracaena is that it does not need to bloom to fulfill its energetic promise. In fact, it often thrives for years without ever producing flowers, and yet its effect is profound. This serves as a potent reminder in Feng Shui. Visible success is only the tip of the energetic iceberg. True growth often happens invisibly first, beneath the surface, behind the scenes, in the quiet choices and steady investments of time, effort, and belief. In many ways, owning and caring for a fragrant dracaena teaches a psychological lesson as much as an energetic one. To trust the process, even when immediate rewards are not apparent. To stay aligned with one's intentions, knowing that unseen forces are quietly assembling on your behalf. I once worked with a young entrepreneur, a woman building her consulting business from a small shared apartment, who was struggling with a sense of stagnation. Despite working tirelessly, opportunities seemed just out of reach. Prospects would get close and then fade away, and she found herself questioning whether all her effort was simply being swallowed by an indifferent universe. After a consultation, she placed a vibrant, fragrant dracaena near her front entrance, honoring it daily with a moment of stillness and gratitude. She didn't move mountains overnight. She didn't land a massive client the next day. But within 6 months, she noticed a shift so undeniable it brought her to tears. Projects she had planted seeds for years prior suddenly began sprouting results. New partnerships emerged seemingly out of nowhere. Her own sense of emotional steadiness deepened, allowing her to handle both setbacks and victories with a maturity she hadn't previously known. She wasn't just attracting wealth, she had grown into someone who could hold it. This ultimately is the hidden genius of the fragrant dracaena. It prepares the energetic field long before visible results appear. It strengthens your ability to steward fortune, not merely stumble into it. Its upward lines, its patient unfolding, its quiet resilience, all these qualities train your subconscious to move away from frantic striving and toward magnetic receiving. It teaches that prosperity, real prosperity, is not won through force, but cultivated through alignment. From a practical care standpoint, the dracaena asks for very little: moderate light, occasional watering, minimal fuss. But like all sacred objects, it responds best when treated with conscious respect. Dust its leaves regularly. Speak to it if you feel called to. Recognize that by nurturing it, you are also nurturing the slow, steady expansion of your own life's fortune. In Feng Shui, plants are never just plants. They are silent architects of the life you are building, one unseen moment at a time. The fragrant dracaena, with its unassuming elegance and deep energetic wisdom, invites you to align not with the urgency of now, but with the inevitability of your destined growth. Plant 3, ginkgo, guardian against energetic wastel lapse. The ginkgo tree stands as a living testament to resilience, clarity, and the ability to withstand even the harshest of storms. In Feng Shui, where the symbolic essence of each living thing matters, few plants offer the same quiet but profound shield as the ginkgo. It is known not merely for its beauty, but for its unique energetic imprint, longevity through adversity, and clarity born from chaos. This is why the ginkgo is especially recommended near workspaces, creative studios, and decision-making zones. Its presence does not merely decorate a space, it actively stabilizes it, absorbs scattered mental energy, and roots the environment in focus, persistence, and renewal. Historically, the ginkgo is revered for surviving cataclysms. Some of the oldest ginkgo trees in the world endured natural disasters, wars, and even the atomic bombings of Hiroshima, sprouting green again in places where everything else perished. This capacity is no accident in energetic terms. A ginkgo does not panic. It does not collapse under pressure. Instead, it absorbs shock, recalibrates, and quietly continues to grow. In Feng Shui, introducing a ginkgo, whether as a full tree outside, a small potted version, or even a carefully tended bonsai, is a way of weaving this same frequency of unbreakable steadiness into your life, particularly where mental resilience is most needed. Its leaves, shaped like ancient fans, seem to gather invisible energy into concentrated pools. Their unique shape enhances focus, allowing scattered mental chi to be recollected and redirected. For individuals facing endless decision fatigue, procrastination, or creativity blocks, the ginkgo operates like an unseen hand, sweeping the mind clean of fog so that clarity can once again emerge. The principle is simple but often forgotten in modern living. When your external environment carries chaos, your internal compass falters. By anchoring a ginkgo near areas of work, study, or important planning, you create a natural field of mental endurance, one that supports not just ambition, but sustainable achievement. Placement, as always in Feng Shui, enhances the ginkgo's natural gifts. For maximum effect, place a ginkgo bonsai or potted version in your office, your home study, or any environment where mental clarity determines outcomes. If possible, situate it slightly to the left of your primary sitting or standing area, symbolizing internal support. If you work facing a wall, let the ginkgo flank that wall, creating a subtle buffer between yourself and energetic stagnation. If you manage creative teams, a larger ginkgo position near collaborative spaces can even stabilize group dynamics, encouraging solutions instead of blame and innovation instead of fear. One client, a talented interior designer, once shared her experience after integrating a ginkgo into her workspace. She had been battling prolonged project delays, miscommunications with clients, and a creeping sense of burnout that no amount of scheduling apps or productivity hacks could seem to fix. After a Feng Shui consultation, she placed a small ginkgo bonsai near the corner of her desk, where it could catch and transmute the rising waves of mental strain that so often accompany creative labor. Within weeks, she reported a tangible shift, not necessarily in the volume of her workload, but in her relationship to it. Her mind felt less entangled. Her workflow smoothed out. Clients too seemed to collaborate more willingly rather than resist changes. Perhaps most importantly, her inner state transformed from brittle and reactive to calm and quietly empowered. This is the deeper magic of the ginkgo in your space. It does not make problems disappear. It makes you, your mind, your will, your clarity, bigger than the problems. It invites you to meet chaos, not with panic, but with poised endurance. to move through uncertainty without being consumed by it. Taking care of a ginkgo also mirrors the lessons it imparts. It asks for patience, slow watering cycles, attention to light without obsession, occasional pruning to honor both old growth and new possibilities. In this relationship, you practice the very qualities you seek to cultivate internally. Patience, focus, strength through slow, steady adjustment. And because qi responds to intention, this active partnership with the plant reinforces your deeper commitment to navigating your own challenges without collapse. In a world obsessed with speed and instant outcomes, the ginkgo quietly reminds you that the strongest structures are the ones you build slowly, with full awareness. Fortune that arrives too fast can evaporate just as quickly. But fortune built on clarity, resilience, and patient cultivation, that kind of fortune stays. Thus, when you welcome a ginkgo into your life, not as a decorative afterthought, but as an energetic ally, you are not merely adding greenery to a room, you are stitching into the fabric of your life an ancient promise that no matter the storms you face, you can endure, you can adapt, and you can continue to grow, stronger, wiser, and more unshakably aligned with your highest path. Plant 4, Mugwort, detoxifier of hidden tensions. Mugwort, often overlooked in modern households, carries a profound legacy in both Feng Shui practice and ancient energy medicine as one of the most effective natural detoxifiers of hidden emotional and spiritual tension. Its reputation transcends cultures, whether in the form of protective bundles above doorways in East Asia or the sacred smudging rituals of indigenous traditions. Mugwort has long been revered as a plant that does not merely scent the air, but fundamentally alters the energetic field of the spaces it touches. In Feng Shui, where the invisible quality of qi determines the vibrancy or decay of a home, Mugwort is prized not for its visual beauty, but for its silent, potent work behind the scenes, absorbing, neutralizing, and transforming energies that would otherwise remain lodged, festering beneath the conscious surface of daily life. Symbolically, Mugwort acts like a vigilant gatekeeper, sweeping away not just overt negativity, but the more insidious, unconscious tensions that gather in high-traffic emotional zones, areas where arguments flare, anxieties rise, or sorrow clings to the walls long after the moments have passed. It purifies without drama. It fortifies without overwhelming. Where some energetic cures seek to push out negativity forcefully, Mugwort operates with quiet sovereignty, dissolving rather than battling, restoring rather than reacting. This makes it uniquely suited for spaces that are lived in heavily, family living rooms, home offices where financial or professional stress accumulates, or bedrooms where the emotional residue of an entire day is released into the air each night. From a practical Feng Shui perspective, integrating Mugwort into a home environment is both simple and profound. The most effective method is to create small, dried bundles of Mugwort, either loosely tied with natural twine or placed in breathable sachets, and position them with intentionality in key energetic bottlenecks. Placing a bundle near the headboard of a bed invites cleaner emotional processing during sleep, allowing unresolved tensions to dissipate rather than imprint deeper into the subconscious. In living rooms or shared communal areas, a discreet bundle tucked into a bookshelf, set atop a mantle, or placed behind a piece of art can serve as a silent stabilizer, absorbing the energetic noise of everyday interactions before it can entrench itself into the emotional fabric of the household. For individuals particularly sensitive to energetic shifts, Mugwort can even be incorporated into personal rituals of renewal. A simple practice involves gently brushing the air around one's body with a Mugwort bundle before sleep or after returning home from crowded, stressful environments. This energetic dusting can clear the auric field, allowing the body's natural qi to recalibrate without the lingering static of external energies. As an added layer, Mugwort's scent itself, earthy, slightly bitter, unmistakably ancient, triggers a deep sense of grounding, pulling the awareness out of the scattered mental loops and back into the stable foundation of the present moment. Yet it is important to approach Mugwort with respect rather than casualness. In Feng Shui, the potency of a cure is not merely mechanical, it is relational. Mugwort is not a passive object, but a living bridge between worlds, between the tangible and the unseen. When you introduce it into your space, you are not simply adding an herb. You are inviting an ancient ally into your energetic household, tasking it with the sacred work of clearing what your eyes cannot see but your spirit inevitably feels. Thus, when placing mugwort, a brief moment of intention, a silent acknowledgement of its role, a whisper of gratitude for its service, magnifies its efficacy. Energy responds to consciousness. Even the humblest herb becomes a powerhouse of transformation when partnered with aware intent. When working with mugwort, freshness matters. Dried bundles retain their potency for some time, but will eventually lose their energetic charge. A good rule of thumb is to replace them seasonally, around every 3 to 4 months, or at key solar transitions such as solstices and equinoxes. Retiring old mugwort respectfully, burning it outdoors with a simple farewell intention, or returning it to the earth, is part of maintaining the purity of the energetic field it protects. Letting bundles rot unnoticed in forgotten corners risks reversing their purpose, turning them from protectors into stagnant reminders of unattended spaces. In terms of placement strategy, prioritize areas where emotional friction most commonly arises or where energy feels inexplicably dense. A living room frequently hosting tense family discussions, a home office weighed down by deadlines, or a bedroom where sleep is restless and dreams agitated, all become natural candidates for mugwort's intervention. Conversely, in rooms already thriving with positive, lively energy, mugwort may not be necessary or could even feel overly heavy. Like all Feng Shui adjustments, the key is responsiveness, not rigidity. Your space will tell you where support is needed if you learn to listen. Ultimately, mugwort offers a priceless lesson in the art of subtle architecture. Not all poisons are visible. Not all healings are loud. Sometimes the deepest repairs happen in the silence between heartbeats, in the breathless stillness, where energy quietly recalibrates itself when given the right tools. By weaving mugwort into your environment with thoughtfulness and respect, you participate in a quiet act of sovereignty over your own energetic destiny. You affirm, without needing words, that your home is not just a shelter, but a living temple of renewal, capable of transmuting pain into wisdom, conflict into clarity, and unseen wounds into open space for prosperity to take root. Plant 5, bonsai pine, stability that grows with you. In the philosophy of Feng Shui, where everything is a mirror of internal states, few living symbols carry the quiet authority of a bonsai pine. It is not merely a decorative miniature, it is a living embodiment of one of the deepest truths of fortune, that what grows slow, grows strong. Bonsai pines, carefully cultivated over years or even decades, represent endurance that is unshaken by seasons, rootedness that outlasts temporary storms, and a commitment to stability that matures rather than fades. When introduced thoughtfully into a home environment, a bonsai pine becomes more than an aesthetic piece. It becomes an energetic cornerstone, holding, nurturing, and reflecting back the kind of wealth that does not evaporate with shifting tides of economy, emotion, or external circumstance. The symbolism of the pine tree has long been revered across many traditions, but in Feng Shui, it holds a particularly exalted place as a harbinger of enduring success and intergenerational prosperity. Unlike fast-blooming flowers that dazzle briefly and wither quickly, the pine persists. Its evergreen nature whispers a message of longevity, unbroken vitality, and an ability to thrive even in adverse conditions. To welcome a bonsai pine into your space is to declare, silently but powerfully, that you are building not just for now but for later, for future generations, for a wealth that is measured not just in numbers but in stability, resilience, and legacy. Placement of a bonsai pine is crucial if one wishes to unlock its full energetic potential. In Feng Shui, the northern sector of a home or office corresponds to career paths and life direction, the journey toward one's true work and lasting contribution. Placing a bonsai pine in this northern quadrant is akin to anchoring your ambitions to something immovable, setting an energetic foundation that supports steady, step-by-step professional and personal advancement. Likewise, entryways serve as the mouth of qi, the place where opportunity, fortune, and new beginnings enter the home. Positioning a bonsai pine near the entrance grounds that incoming energy, ensuring that what comes into your life does not simply flicker briefly and fade, but finds fertile soil to take root and grow. When integrating a bonsai pine into your living space, intentionality matters as much as physical location. Care for it mindfully, not as an obligation, but as a form of daily energetic dialogue. Water it with attention, prune it with respect. Every small act of stewardship becomes an embodied metaphor for how you tend to the stability and prosperity of your own life. Over time, the pine, shaped by your hands, also shapes you, teaching patience, reinforcing discipline, and modeling the quiet strength that builds fortunes too solid to be shaken by passing storms. There is also a deeper layer to the relationship between bonsai pines and family foundations. In Feng Shui, the family is the root system of a person's fortune. Where the family thrives in harmony and shared purpose, individual success amplifies naturally. Where it fractures, even great external accomplishments can feel hollow and unsustainable. A bonsai pine positioned thoughtfully in shared family spaces, such as a living room, ancestral altar area, or communal study, can subtly reinforce the energy of unity, perseverance, and loyalty. It reminds all who pass by that true wealth is not solitary. It is relational, woven through shared roots and mutual growth. A true story illustrates this principle beautifully. A middle-aged entrepreneur once shared that after a period of great financial success, he felt increasingly adrift at home. Arguments with his siblings, emotional distance from his children, and a gnawing sense of instability overshadowed his professional wins. On the advice of a Feng Shui consultant, he introduced a mature bonsai pine into his family home, placed strategically near the front entryway. He began tending to it daily, not as a chore, but as a conscious practice of reconnection. Over the following year, he reported that family dinners became more frequent, laughter returned to his home, and even his business ventures, once driven by anxious ambition, began to feel steadier and more fulfilling. He described the change not as dramatic, but as organic, as if the energy had slowly relearned how to nourish itself. This is the true gift of the bonsai pine. It does not promise overnight transformation. It promises steady companionship in the slow, dignified work of real growth. It teaches that what matters most is not how quickly we rise, but how deeply we are anchored when the winds inevitably blow. It reminds us that fortune built with patience, respect, and intention is not fortune easily lost. When you walk past a bonsai pine thoughtfully placed in your home, you are walking past a living testament to your commitment to lasting abundance. You are affirming that your prosperity is not built on trends or luck, but on something far more enduring: alignment, stewardship, and quiet strength. In a world that often celebrates flashy, fragile success, the bonsai pine stands as a silent guardian of the truth. True wealth grows slowly, invisibly at first, but becomes unshakable with time. And in tending to it, you tend to the deeper architecture of your destiny. Plant 6, Evodia, shield against external harm. In the world of Feng Shui, where unseen currents shape the visible tides of our lives, protection is not merely a defensive act. It is an active cultivation of clarity, stability, and sovereignty within one's environment. Among the many living guardians available to those who know how to use them, the Evodia tree stands out as a powerful yet often overlooked ally. Known in ancient traditions for its potent energetic field, Evodia carries the symbolism of a shield, one that quietly holds back discordant energies, tempers hostile external forces, and fortifies the home's natural qi against contamination from the outside world. Evodia, with its dense foliage, sturdy form, and vibrant vitality, embodies the principle that protection does not have to be aggressive or obvious. True protection is silent, steady, and almost invisible, an energetic filtration system that works quietly in the background, allowing the home's internal harmony to flourish undisturbed. In Feng Shui, when we speak of external sha, harmful influences from the outside, such as harsh intersections, chaotic streets, aggressive neighboring structures, or even environments saturated with negative history, the Evodia serves as an energetic sponge and barrier, absorbing, diffusing, and neutralizing these forces before they penetrate the sacred boundary of the living space. Strategic placement of Evodia is essential to unlock its full shielding capabilities. Boundary gardens, the perimeters of a property, are ideal homes for this guardian. Planting Evodia trees along the fence line, near outdoor spaces that face problematic directions, such as sharp corners, dead-end roads, or visibly struggling properties, effectively creates a natural buffer. It is like erecting an invisible energetic net that catches turbulence before it reaches the heart of the home. Notably, Evodia should not be confined to ornamental roles in hidden back gardens. It should be placed where it can intercept, where it can fulfill its role as the first energetic line of defense. The power of Evodia is not theoretical. It has been proven through countless quiet success stories. One particular family offers a compelling modern illustration. Living in a charming but energetically troubled house near a notoriously chaotic intersection, they had long endured a series of minor yet unsettling incidents. Arguments among family members that seemed to ignite from nowhere. Random minor accidents, unexplained financial leaks. While beautiful on the inside, their home never quite felt stable or protected. On the advice of a seasoned Feng Shui practitioner, they planted a row of young Evodia trees along the side of their property most exposed to the chaotic cross-street energy. They didn't make any other dramatic changes. They didn't rearrange their furniture or buy expensive cures. They simply planted a living shield and waited. Within 6 months, the difference was palpable. The incessant arguing eased into genuine, calm conversation. Financial leaks stopped appearing mysteriously. Even the external environment seemed to cooperate. The city finally installed a speed bump near their corner, reducing the energy of speeding cars that had once rushed past their home like hostile arrows. The family described the shift not as an overnight miracle, but as a gradual exhalation, as if their house had finally stopped bracing itself against the world and begun breathing normally again. Their story is one of hundreds, whispered across cultures and centuries, that testify to the quiet but formidable power of natural living allies like Evodia. What makes Evodia particularly potent compared to other protective plants is its combination of resilience and vibrational neutrality. It does not amplify anger to fight anger. It does not mirror back hostility. Instead, it anchors, it stabilizes. It soaks up turbulence and offers it back to the earth to be transmuted. In doing so, it reflects one of the deepest lessons from both Feng Shui and ancient wisdom traditions. True defense is not about retaliation. It is about alignment. When the foundation is steady, when the boundaries are clear, when the living energy of a home is fortified with intention and grace, external chaos loses its foothold. In welcoming an Evodia into your home's perimeter, you are not only strengthening your immediate physical surroundings, you are also making a profound energetic statement. Here, peace is protected. Here, fortune is given room to root and grow. The subtle currents of fortune, health, and relational harmony feel this signal, and over time they respond. No flashy rituals, no anxious warding off, just the slow, dignified work of setting clear, living boundaries and letting nature do what it was always designed to do: protect, nurture, and stabilize the spaces we call home. If your environment feels battered by invisible storms, or if you simply wish to future-proof the energetic integrity of your home, the Evodia stands ready. It does not shout, it does not waver, it does not demand attention. It simply grows silently and steadily into one of your home's greatest protectors, holding the line so your life, your family, and your dreams can unfold with the safety and grace they deserve. There is a quiet truth most people overlook in the rush of modern living. Plants are not passive. They are not mere decorations or background scenery. They listen, they observe, and most importantly, they shape. They slowly, patiently, wordlessly help build what your future feels like. Every leaf, every root, every silent growth reaching toward the light is also guiding the unseen key of your home, either fortifying your dreams or diluting them. And whether you are fully aware of it or not, your space is already becoming a reflection of the invitations you have extended. You don't need to transform your entire garden or overhaul your whole house overnight. That's never how real change takes root. Start with just one shift, one living being that aligns with the energy you wish to cultivate, whether it's the quiet resilience of a bonsai pine, the expansive wisdom of a mini bodhi tree, or the grounded shielding strength of an Evodia. Invite that energy into your home, tend it with awareness, and observe not only how the air feels fresher, but how your own inner landscape begins to reorganize around a deeper sense of stability, growth, and flow. Your living space is always listening. Your fortune is already responding. Which plant speaks to you today? Which energy feels like the next right beginning for your journey? I would be deeply honored to hear your reflections. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me, which living shield will you plant, not just in your home, but in your life? If this video stirred something inside you, an insight, a question, a quiet remembering, I warmly invite you to support this channel's growing community. Please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who might need these gentle reminders, and subscribing to New Day Mindfulness. Your presence here helps us move closer to our first 1,000 followers, a threshold that allows us to bring more grounded, timeless Feng Shui wisdom into more homes, hearts, and families across the world. And as you leave today's reflection and return to your daily life, carry this truth softly with you. The garden you tend in your home reflects the fortune you tend in your soul. Until next time, may your space be rooted in strength, your future be nourished by clarity, and your every quiet step forward be blessed with unseen support.